So here we are in the shop, and the waste oil burner is better than I expected, honestly. There are still some things to improve upon. That's why I have a welder helmet on, and let me show you what they are. I've made mention of a draft diverter, and I now understand that that might not be the best thing as far as the operation of this goes. I sealed this entire thing up the best I could. There are some spots I did not weld, but a little bit of fresh air going up through there won't be a big deal. It's still going to improve upon the draft situation. Now, the only air going up through the chimney is going to be combustion air that comes through this tube and vents out of here. I probably will botch this, but understanding that burners need oxygen in more than one way. There's primary air and there's secondary air. And primary air is what this blower is doing. Secondary air is like the afterburn, cleaning up the rest of the burn. So it might be something where I have to integrate an air opening grate into the tank that doesn't go through the burner. So it'll kind of just help to burn off the rest of the fuels that turn into smoke. Purely for my own entertainment, I am choosing to keep as much of the air compressor components as possible, including this grab rail. Now, technically speaking, it could also be considered a safeguard. You know, like if this foam starts to melt, back up a little bit. Now that I have addressed the dilution air or the air mixture, and this is going to be pretty hot all the time, I can begin to reassemble this and then start working on maybe a little bit more of a permanent or semi-permanent oil feed. I've got some ideas. So now let's talk about math. The circumference of a pipe is calculated by pi times diameter, okay? Pi is 3.1514, I think. So I generally speaking just say pretty much 3. So 3 times 4 is going to be a little over 12 inches around, okay? Now, this is my little feed system for my oil. I showed it to you in another video about how I can rotate this out of the way. And we're gonna move Sam for the time being. So I can get into here and I can clean this funnel that I've created out of an old hitch ball. And I didn't really go into much detail, I don't think, but pretty much I drilled a 1/2 inch hole all the way down to maybe 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of this shank. And then I followed it up with just under 3/8 of an inch. And then I turned this around in the lathe and I just kissed it with a little bit undersized 3/8 inch end mill. And what that did was made it so if I clean this pipe up really well, it's pretty much a press fit. And that's pretty much what I did, was I just held this in place best I could, had a big dead blow hammer, and just whopped on it a whole bunch. If I ever notice that it's seeping here, I can clean it up, but I think any moisture or residue that's there is from me spilling yesterday when I was testing. So I have this control valve that I do believe I'll probably double up. One that I can use for just a full shut off, and then one to dial in my flow, if you will. So I'll have one more shut off, and then I think I'm going to have some type of a funnel, a bigger funnel than this big counterboard hitch ball. and I'll tell you why here in a moment. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with my 12-inch circumference of this vent pipe. So I've got these here sections of steel tubing, and my longest one I believe is 5/16 inch, and then I have this one that's pretty decent sized 3/8 inch. And what I am thinking is, if I have my extra valve here and then a funnel here, looking back without tape measuring, my vent pipe was about as high as my nose, the one that was internal inside of here, when I was assembling it. So about here is where the pipe is going to start getting hot. So if I have my valve, a funnel, and this steel tubing, I think what I'm going to end up doing is just tack welding it here to the pipe, and then just using my own pressure and spiraling around and creating my preheater. I think that's going to work very well. And then on the other end, I can just use a compression fitting that hooks up to a tank hanging on the wall or on a stand or something like that. So that, I believe this is going to be enough. I could probably calculate it in a short time. I have 12 inches across, and pi times 12. There's over 36 inches here, and that would give me, that doesn't work. Pi times 3, 12, 3. I don't know. According to the calculations, that would give me 3 wraps around this, but there's 3 convolutions. Oh, there's 3, 6, 9 wraps around. So I could almost wrap, I bet 7 times easily and have enough sticking out to make connections. Probably where the compression fitting would be another valve to shut this off. And I don't know if I'd have another valve on the bottom side or not. Sometimes mathing is hard, and that's okay. How's that for a preheater? I think I like that. See my funnel here? I have an old bike peg and then a worn out hole saw. Hopefully I'll be able to bend this and, you know, hit that, whatever that is, 1.5 inch hole. I welded up the slots. I burned that in real good and hot. Hope it don't leak. Now, I argued myself right out of shutoff valves on this stack. I don't want this to be my metering valve, because if I have it metering here, then I also have to have it metering here to not overflow but not run this out, which I think is silly. I might as well have my final valve over here. I might even do some type of like a trunnion, however that's called, and have a little knob down here that opens and closes that. I think that's going to be the way to go. Now this whole series I have not mentioned this, but everything that you see here, take it with a grain of salt and proceed with caution at your own risk. I am not an engineer. I am not certified for anything waste oil burner. I'm taking this as my own responsibility and precautions here. So this is kind of a fun scenario in my head. Standard B vent needs a minimum of 1/4 inch per foot rise slope to vent properly. Resner says they want a 1/4 inch per foot slope downwards to drain condensate so their burners are run clean, I guess. Now, this is my problem, my issue. My vent system here is built for drain slope. My vent requirements are built for an increase in slope. The way this slip fits, if I'm going to rise, I could potentially be draining condensate back, which would probably burn off. Not a big deal. But where my pipes slide together, you can kind of see here, one pipe is a bell when it slides over. My remaining sections of pipe should slide over to be installed, but if it's sloped back, it could be a condensate drip spot. I do believe I'm gonna just try to slather in there some high temp RTV and just seal that bottom. And hopefully it works, because I want to vent with draft in mind more than the design of the piping in mind. I also don't really want to have condensate dripping along the way. So there's that. I have set with my digital protractor, I have set a 1/4 inch per foot rise, and I have a tape measure hanging on the wall, and I'm just going to eyeball what my top of my pipe hits as far as that goes. Then I'll know where my hole needs to be in the wall. Now, I can't actually see my digits, but I do know that there's a big black square at 1 foot, and I'm 3 inches below that. So I'm at 15 inches below where it's hanging, and that's where I need to be. Wonderful. Now that is the top of my 4-inch hole. I need to mark down 2 inches, and then before I get all drill happy with a 6.5 inch hole saw, I'm going to drill straight through the shop with a 3/16 inch bit. That's about that long. So that way I can just verify on the exterior of the building that I am right where I need to be. Now, I did opt for only about a 1-inch drop, even though I needed to be here. Reason being, I've got a 2x4 mounted here, and I needed to be above that for my thimble to go through the wall. Well, as far as center lines go, I can work with that. I like it. I don't have a big enough hole saw. I think I've got a 5-inch. But I did figure out that I could use this to make myself a guideline. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark my outside. I'm going to cut my 5-inch hole, so it'll be like here, and then I'll just trim the rest out with tin snips. Do that on both sides, clear out the insulation, install my thimble. Now, my hillbilly jack stand, shop broom, zip tie, big ladder conundrum is working. I have my pipe assembled to the point where it's up in the air, and I feel good about that. Now, I wish there was a better way. Assembling this vent pipe, I don't know. There's clearly a gap there at the wall. This B vent here, I've got just a small section, barely, and I really mean barely, fits over this black pipe. And this is like snug, very snug. Now this B vent is the right vent size for that thimble. This B vent also, generally speaking, vents this way. But for the sake of it, I'm going to go from the outside and slide through that thimble and pick up this pipe and then just kind of whack this on, keep it my safe distance from the exterior of the building. I'll have to look that up, but I'm guessing 12 inches from any overhang is going to be ample amount. And then I'll cut this off with a Sawzall and then hook up with just a vent stack. Because it'll be outside, it'll be doing its own thing. I think that'll be good enough. I do my own stunts. It's working. I've got this 650 degree high temp silicone. I just slid this apart a little bit and gave myself two big fat bands of RTV. I'm going to slide it back together, and then I've decided that I don't even think I need to cut that off over there. I just need to figure out what my distance from a sidewall I need to be, and I'm just going to keep pounding it. I've got both sides finished off with that high temp RTV, and that will seal my gap, and all is well. I'm going to call this complete for now. I have some anchors coming that I'll be able to run up into the ceiling and then attach with 3/8 inch threaded rod or eye bolts. I have my Radiant Heat shields and mounts and brackets to install still. But for the time being, I'm just going to let this RTV set up inside and out. And then next step is going to be building some type of a rack here to store an oil drum of sorts.